Here we go. I'd like to welcome everyone to tonight's speaker series, Soil Sangre de Cristo speaker series. We are delighted to have Devon Peña with the Acequia Institute of San Luis here with us tonight. Devon is actually in Seattle, Washington, where he teaches, and he's joining with us tonight. And Devon, I'd just like to make a brief introduction, is the founder of the Acequia Institute, and the latest project, along with some other funders, has purchased the oldest continually operating business, a grocery store in Colorado called the R&R. It's now the San Luis People's Market, which is being reorganized and will be open again soon as a community food cooperative. Dr. Peña will discuss the basics of bioregionalism and how societies from our various regions depend on each other for nourishment and productivity. And with bioregionalism, to me, it's something that Soil has certainly been working with and helping people understand, and how these communities all through the South Central region of Colorado work together with what we can provide each other and how we support each other. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Devon Peña. Thank you so much, Devon, for being here tonight.
Molto, can you hear me okay?
Yes, thank you.
I'm loud enough? Everything? Okay. Muchas gracias, Molto. Thank you. It's very exciting to be here because we're very interested in creating relationships with organizations like Soil in order to rebuild our solidarity economies across not just the valley, but the entire state. In fact, the entire world needs solidarity economics instead of the dominant predatory economics that we live under right now. So thank you for this wonderful invitation. So I want to do a land acknowledgement. In the San Luis Valley, especially on the Sangre de Cristo land grant, we are in Nuchi, which is to say Southern Ute, Diné, Navajo, and Tiwa, Apache Plus ancestral territories, and also on the Mercedes Sangre de Cristo, the Mexican community land grant of 1843. Mocto to all our ancestors for allowing us to be in this space and work in this beautiful land. And it's a very complicated place. In part, what we have faced, of course, is a tension between so-called modern agriculture, which is very much an agribusiness style of doing things, large-scale monocrops, pesticides, herbicides, GMO crops, all of it, and our approach, which is agroecological and biodynamic approaches to producing food in a way that provides ecosystem services to the land and water that we co-inhabit with other beings. So a lot of people may not know this, but the 80,000 acre headwaters of the river that provides our irrigation water, the Culebra River, is a common land. It was a land grant from 1843, and it is the largest restored commons on the planet. And that in itself is perhaps a separate presentation someday. We want to talk about what that means. Also unique to our community, as many of you already know, is the Acequia irrigation technology and governance structures and institutions that we've had. This is important because the Acequia water law is prior to prior, as was finally admitted in the Colorado Acequia recognition law signed by Governor Ritter in 2009. The acequia, the word itself comes from the Arabic. Acequia is celebrated all over the world, and certainly in Colorado and New Mexico, as the water democracy of the Rio Arriba bioregion. And maybe before I proceed, I should be clear about what I mean by bioregion. There are several components. One, you have to understand the watershed boundaries as a locale. It involves a biotic shift, a particular mix of biodiversity. And it also includes, I think, often overlooked local knowledge, indigenous knowledge that's true to that place. One of the things that I like to do I'm a myth buster when it comes to environmental and agricultural history. And the vara strips that we have, they're called riparian long lots in English. And the vara strips are actually, everyone used to say before we got doing research on the question many years ago, back in the 90s, everyone kept saying, well, the vara strip is, it's from Spain and it's a tradition from Roman law. No, it's not. Actually, you may be surprised to learn that it's those darn Visigoths who brought the riparian long lot to New Mexico, to Spain, and then it came from different regions of Spain, including Andalusia. The Visigoths entered Spain 3 times as a conquest invasion, and they introduced the long lot, which they call Hoffendorf, when they converted to Christianity, to Catholicism in the 5th century Common Era. It's very interesting history. And here you have some photos on the right of some long lots, and those are the ones in San Francisco, the village of San Francisco. And on the left, you have a photo of the beautiful headwaters of the Sangre de Cristo, the Culebra range of the Sangre de Cristos. Yeah, here's a picture from Saxony, Germany, of the long lots that look very much like our long lots. So they're not Spanish, they're not Roman, they are Visigothic in origin. And a lot of people get blown away by that, but that's the beauty of our system, is it's brought in plants, animals, traditions of farming practices, the sharing of land, the common land, the long lot, cultural landscape from 3 continents. So Africa, Europe, and Asia, actually, Eurasia, and then, of course, native North America or Turtle Island have all contributed to who we are. Our acequia flood irrigated practice is often viewed as primitive and inefficient, but it regenerates our soil because the water comes from the highest mountain peaks. And of course, from the cirques all the way down to our fields, you've got a lot of wonderful minerals that are useful for agriculture. And that's why different studies have shown that we have very deep soil horizons and no heartpan in most of the farms that we irrigate this way. We are making climate change adaptations. So a lot of us will, in times of drought, we will use drip irrigation, but we don't want to give up the regenerative advantages of flood irrigated practice. But you've got to be really good at it, otherwise you will cause erosion. These 2 gentlemen, both of them now passed away, were among my mentors starting in the 1980s. I'm actually going to be celebrating 40 years in San Luis this year in 1980. I arrived in 1984 and when I was teaching at Colorado College. And on the left is Corpus Gallegos, the father of Joseph Gallegos, who passed away, unfortunately, in 2016. He was also one of my mentors, but they're the ones who taught me how to farm with acequias. And then on the right is Adelmo Caber, a very wise gentleman who also taught me a lot about farming with acequia methods. One of the other reasons that we're celebrated, and I think this is totally an important principle for following a bioregional approach to co-inhabitation of places, which is, does your activity, whatever you're doing, to transform or to have a relationship between humans and more than human beings, including water, are you providing ecosystem services? Or you might phrase it a different way, are you being a good ancestor? And I always kind of judge myself and my actions. Am I being a good ancestor is the question. The ecosystem services have been well documented in our work. Here's a photo, by the way, of my dear mentor and dearest brother and friend, Joe Gallegos, who, as you all know, was county commissioner for many years and a leader in the environmental justice and acequia democracy movements. There's so much to say about this, including agrobiodiversity, food production, raw materials, natural controls, soil conservation, soil formation, nutrient cycling, water supply, water regulation, water treatment, microclimatic regulation. Yeah, even that. And I'm going to just pause there for a moment, actually, because the microclimatic regulation is something that we've kind of like had a few disagreements with the state engineer's office, in part because Colorado water law under prior appropriation considers phreatophytes to be a non-beneficial use of water. So they encourage the destruction of wetlands and riparian corridors in the interest of making sure that we're just optimizing water for economic purposes. But in fact, from our point of view, not only do we want the cottonwoods, willows, alders, we also want the osha and all the medicine plants that and edible plants that grow along these riparian corridors. So the microclimatic regulation is actually a way of producing habitat for a lot of useful plants and also movement corridors for wildlife, which are very important in today's world where habitat fragmentation is such a serious problem. And that's why we really like habitat, as you can see here at our farm by the Culebra River. When we took over this land in 2005 to create the farm for the Acequia Institute, all this was caving in from livestock that was left there in the winter and the spring. They were there all the time. We built some fencing. We still have livestock, but they're now north of the river, not allowed to go to the river. And so when people ask me, what do you grow? And I only half jokingly, half tongue in cheek, I grow ecosystems. I help ecosystems recover, and we're very proud of the work we've done on ecological restoration. That is another bioregional principle that we should learn to follow. Sorry. And of course, without community, there is no farming. You need to revive community institutions of collective action, and that's actually what our San Luis Food Sovereignty Project is all about. A lot of that is just reinvigorating and reawakening the cultural memory and the existing institutions that are true to place, like the annual springtime ditch cleaning that we do, not only with our neighbors, but with youth as we try to mentor them in the art of acequia agroecology. Another thing that's unique to our community is our native landrace crops. And I could get all fancy and do a presentation just on this, but the Matsuoka genomes map of corn shows that they did some accessions in Colorado, in fact, in the San Luis Valley. And so they have listed the San Luis area as a center of origin and diversification of native heirloom maize or maize. And that includes, of course, our famous maize de concho. Well, here's a photo of some of the stuff that I grow. Every now and then you'll see a little blue corn from the Guadalupita Azul encinal that we grow. We don't worry too much about those kinds of landrace chimeras, as you may call them. In fact, we sometimes do that on purpose. The name of our maíz de concho, which we used to make our famous chicos del horno, is the scientific name, if you want to call it that, is Zeames clibanus culebrana. It's a unique landrace that grows within 74 to 84 days. It matures. It only grows about 3 feet high, but the cobs are at least 12 inches long. And they're very much adapted to the high elevation of San Luis, which includes very intense UVB radiation. That radiation increases about 10 to 11% for every 1,000-foot gain in elevation. So compared to sea level, we're like 80% more intense in terms of UV radiation. Try to grow GMO corn from Monsanto on our land and it'll die. It's not adapted to the high elevation. This is one reason we are so protective of our native landrace seeds. We don't want corporate America to get hold of it. But here's a good example of it shows all the different varieties of corn that we grow. But I want to dwell for a moment, you all, on something that's really important. This on the left is a tourniquet. George Beadle got the Nobel Prize for the discovery of the origins of Zeames. And this is what he called a tourniquet. And what it is, it's an intermediary between the wild teosinte, you can see the teosinte is still in there, and the domesticated corn. And this will only occur in native landrace varieties that have not been contaminated either by hybrid gene sequences or intergression events from GMOs. And so it's a good test of the purity and the integrity, I should say, of the genome. And so every now and then, almost every year, in fact, this pops up in our fields whenever we're growing maíz de concho. And if you all have maíz de concho, look for this. It'll be an indication of how close is it to its wild ancestors. And so this happens because the plant is sentient. All plants are sentient. That's a scientific statement, although it's been an indigenous idea for centuries. It's now verified by scientists. They communicate, they sense the environment. They don't talk language like we do, but they use chemical signals and maybe even electromagnetic signals to communicate. And so our corn is very smart. And here, when it goes into the tunicate form, it basically wants to revert back to wildness, is what it's doing. And so you have to be taking care of the sacredness in corn. This is very deep relationship that we have with our ZMAs. Deep seeds is what I call them. And of course, I think we would all agree that in a bioregional approach to agro-ecosystems, diversity is the key to resilience. Another part of the work we're doing, and I'll get to this in a moment, is to address certain health challenges in Costilla County. We're bringing back the milpa diet, exploring the introduction of heritage cuisine, and of course, the growing of heritage crops. And all this is really important. I don't have time to discuss it today, but I've done a lot of research and I teach a class called Decolonizing the Soil Rhizosphere and Human Gut Microbiome. And so it's an agroecology course that I teach every year. And that has led to a lot of important work that we're doing on the ground in San Luis so that the science informs our own practice. I'll share that in a moment of how that particular thing works. Nixtamalization is another concept you need to know. The reason that Europeans got pellagra and got sick when they got corn in Mexico and took it to Europe is they didn't nixtamalize it, and so they got sick. Nixtamalization is a process basically where you're preparing traditionally with wood ash, but now in more modern times with calcium hydroxide, which is a cal or cooking lye or slate limestone. There's a lot of names for it. And what this does is it removes the pericarp and it which exposes the germ and transforms that to make all the B vitamin series, the amino acids, the anti-inflammatory phytochemicals available, they become bioavailable for the human digestive system. So you have to nixtamalize your corn if you're going to eat corn. Otherwise, it's empty carbs and a lot of sugar. This is a shot of our how the grasses come back. I should have put a shot of how degraded it was. But this is the Culebra Creek at our Almunia, which is an Arabic word that means a private research and extension service farm and farm school. And that's what we are, actually. So Almunia is a great word. I really like that word. This is one of my elder, when I got to meet her, I was still young. She's in her 90s, I'm in my 70s. But she's one of my esteemed mentors. Many of you know Maestra Teresa Vigil, an ethnobotanist, a healer, an herbalist, also has a nursing degree, worked in the Bay Area with nursing for many decades. And so we like to draw from our own local ethnobotanical knowledge as part of the overall picture of traditional environmental knowledge, or what I call the real high tech. We connect local students to this knowledge. We also bring in, as you can see here, this young redhead. I had a group of University of Washington students who have joined the local people on many different occasions. So what am I going to do with the rest of my presentation? There's three things that I want to do. I want to tell the community of the challenges and the opportunities posed by the reality on the ground in San Luis. And then I'll talk about the project design principles and show you how we're enacting those in various programs, and then close up with a more thorough going through the food sovereignty initiative that that we're involved in. So that's the rest of the presentation. This is the challenge, is San Luis, Costilla County has the highest rate of obesity in this and diabetes in the state. About 45 to 55% obesity, and is actually 41% is overweight, and about a quarter, 25% are obese. Now, I've read my colleague Julie Guffman's book, Weighing in which she says, be careful with the obesity construct. It can be nothing more than body shaming rather than an accurate prediction of morbidities and chronic and acute illness. So you have to be careful with that. But we do have in San Luis, and it's gone up, we think, from 13.3% to 15% of the population has been diagnosed with diabetes, both type 1 and type 2. As you all know, type 2 can be reversed with diet and exercise and lifestyle changes. And so there are a lot of epigenetic factors, but certainly diet is very strongly associated. I won't say there's a causal effect, but there's a correlational one between how we eat and the occurrence of emergent conditions like diabetes and cardiovascular illnesses. So the other thing is that the health of Costilla County community suggests that the loss of the common lands, of the enclosure of the common lands in 1960 by Jack Taylor, a direct descendant of President Zachary Taylor, had long duration effects, including diminishing our food sovereignty and our healthier heritage foodways by destroying access to the common lands, which we use to gather wild medicine plants and food and for our livestock. And so that ended for almost 40 years before our use rights were restored. Like I said, we have the largest restored commons on the planet, 80,000 acres. Another problem that we're dealing with, and we just received a grant ourselves, is all of Main Street has fallen into disrepair because all the buildings have asbestos and lead paint. And so we're the tip of the iceberg, and we just happen to be in a position to grab some money. We were granted some money from the Colorado Department of Public Health and the Environment. It's going to cost us about $202,000 to get rid of the asbestos and lead paint at the R&R market, now the San Luis People's Market. So we hope this will create a ripple effect resulting in all of the buildings being assisted with this kind of abatement work in the future. My way of thinking about things is that and look, I grow alfalfa and I also have beef cattle on our land. But we used to be a breadbasket in San Luis. We produced all our food. People would grow things like cauliflower and cabbage, all the brassicas actually, and a lot of legumes, including fava beans, our famous bolita beans, and so on. And then we stopped. And what happened, and it's complicated, I don't have time to talk about why did this happen, but it's true across the valley that we've either become monoculture, an alfalfa or other kind of crop monoculture, and a beef export colony. And what that meant is that we stopped producing food for the local community for the most part. And we've been, I would say, moderately successful at getting farmers to grow food as well. We're not telling people, stop growing alfalfa, but can you give me 1 or 2 acres of food out of your 30 acres or your 50 acres? And they're starting to agree to do that. So that's an important part of our project, is to get a return to our polycultures rather than being stuck in these monocultures. So the solidarity economy that we're trying to build is designed to do several things that will improve the community health outcomes in the Culebra River Acequia villages by doing the following. We are reviving and strengthening our local agri-food system by bringing back the many crop traditions of our heritage. And we're also focused on crops that are part of a heritage cuisine to bring back the brassicas, of course, rekindling and expanding the production of our famous bolita beans and our beautiful corn and our beautiful calabacitas. All of them are very healthy foods. And we're also growing cactus in a greenhouse. And the cactus, of course, is especially important both as a preventative and a therapeutic when dealing with diabetes, especially diabetes type 2, because it's a mucilaginous plant. It is slow release and it can help lower and control glycemic level problems. So that's important. We, of course, then therefore, through these heritage cuisines that we produce on our polyculture farms, we want to end hunger. I will never use the term food security or food insecurity problem. It hides what it is. It's hunger and malnutrition. Why do you not call it what it is? Bureaucracies have a way of inventing, substitute words like food insecurity to talk about something that ought to be more stark and not neutralize. The horror of it shouldn't be neutralized by jargon like food insecurity. Well, what does that mean? We all know what hunger and malnutrition is. We aim to decolonize the diet of Costilla County by going back to traditional crops from our restored agroecosystems. And this is what will allow us to grow community food sovereignty. We're also very much focused on our youth, supporting the creativity and commitment of our younger generations to remain living and investing in their villages. Not all the youth want to go to college. Many of them, therefore, are being helped by getting trained in all the skill occupations that support agriculture. And in fact, one of my proudest moments was when we got one of the young women to get a diesel mechanics AA, Associate of Arts degree from Trinidad Community College. That's the kind of work that a lot of the students that we work with want to do, and the young adults as well. So supporting their creativity and commitment to remain, making it possible for them to remain. We're also doing this, as I will show you in a moment, through our, similar to soil, our endowment to support a revolving loan fund to help young adults get food-related businesses going. And so this is what we're really all about, number 5. That's the key to our strategy. We really believe that, and this is true for everyone, all the folks who work with soil in different parts of Colorado, as well as in the San Luis Valley, we are really about co-creating and revitalizing interwoven institutions of collective action. It's not about individuals. This is about collective action. The mutual aid society is very important. And in our case, the SPMDTU is our mutual aid society that had gone quiet in the 1950s. It's just got reactivated last year. Concilio number 31 has been reauthorized to open operations, and I'll talk about why that's important in a moment. But of course, the Acequia farmer co-ops that we're organizing, all of these are initiatives that will generate agriculture-based wealth and keep it in our community. And here, of course, we have the Move Mountains youth being instructed on how to make chicos del horno. Finally, some of the work we do is restoring heritage crops like the local heirloom bolita beans. On the left there, the others are commercial hybrid. So if you're a farmer, you'll get more yield if you go with the commercial hybrid, but it doesn't have the same culinary and nutritional properties as the heirloom. And you know, what bolitas are famous for is that they produce an incredible creamy broth on their own without you having to add salt pork or anything else. And that doesn't happen with the commercial hybrid. Now, to get specific about what is guiding the instruction, the educational workshops and field experiences of our youth, Acequia interns, and these are the basic principles of indigenous biodynamics that I have published about, and I'm happy, anyone who requests, PJ, I'll be happy to share other publications that I've done that discuss these concepts in more detail.
Thank you, Devon. Great, thanks.
So, and it's not that different from other approaches. We're not claiming that this is unique to indigenous people, but it is clearly for us, the first principle is you have to treat soil as a living organism. You should follow regenerative practices through manure, composting, recognizing what's involved in allelopathic companion planting, and the use of soil treatments, tinctures, I don't use ram's horns, but I do think that there's a lot to be said about Rudolf Steiner and biodynamics, and I'll get back to that in a moment. You have to respect diversity, follow polycultures, and always include a mix of perennial and annual crops so you can minimize tillage. And use livestock. Don't be afraid to use livestock. They actually can play a very positive role in the agroecological system. Rest. Don't be greedy. Do rotations in fallow. I don't have time to describe our practices, but it's been very effective at keeping the soil horizon deep and healthy. So why would we do that? Because look, if you have healthy soil, you're going to have more nutritious crops, basically, and this is a very important principle. And overall, be mindful, be kind, be gentle. Avoid making tepetate, which is a Nahuatl word for heart pan. They understood this. In fact, the Aztecs, so-called, the Mexica, they had one of the most advanced soil sciences, 400 years ago. And when the Spanish arrived, all this was, of course, erased. But the Soil Conservation Service, which emerges in the Great Depression, developed a model that was very similar to what the indigenous people of Mexico were following. We have our own indigenous ethnoscience, and that's what we're trying to use to recover. But I do like juxtaposing two very knowledgeable elders. Rudolf Steiner, in his agriculture class in 1922, writes, "That which secures life from exhaustion lies in the unseen world, deep at the root of things, in the rhizosphere." And here we have my dear Adelmo Caber. You saw a photo of him irrigating his potato crop earlier. He said, very simply, but agreeing with Rudolf Steiner, who he never read, el frijol le da fuerza a la tierra. When he said, the bean gives strength to the land. That's why I planted it. So what a beautiful juxtaposition. We are also biodynamic farmers. We just don't call it that. And we also have a saying, we're not organic because we can't afford to certify organic. So we also can't afford to use chemicals. So that's a good thing. What's our strategy then? What are we doing to implement these principles and address the challenges that I have outlined for you? Well, we've created a Milpa Molino collaborative, which mobilizes the farmers to go back to polyculture milpas, and while supplying our volcanic rock cornmeal operation with non-GMO organic heirloom corn and companion plants, and that are destined for sale at the San Luis People's Market Co-op, and also distributed through our local food pantry, which we actually operate our version of the food pantry out of the old Head Start building. And then, of course, was reinventing the R&R market as the San Luis People's Market, and converting it to a community food cooperative that will include an agricultural workshop and production center, although most of our production will actually take place at what we call the San Luis People's Market Annex, which is a beautiful building designed by Arnie Valdez, beautiful adobe building with passive solar, and we're using that for our production line. Currently, it has a commercial kitchen, and we're building a second commercial kitchen at the market. So we'll have actually two commercial kitchens. One will be used for the incubator project to produce local foods for sale at the market, and the other will be used as a restaurant deli operation for cooking classes, which we've been holding for some time. The volcanic rock cornmeal, you're going to see some of the product out of that in a moment. The other two pieces of our strategy, of course, is establishing the Mutual Aid Society Revolving Credit Association. We have a perpetual endowment. It's created to provide youth and young adults with funding, zero interest loans, to produce food for the market. And of course, the SPMDTU, the Sociedad Protectora Mutualista de Trabajadores Unidos, Erica, I hope I'm not speaking too fast for you. That's our mutual aid society. It was founded early 1900s, and it kind of went quiet. I won't say defunct. It was never defunct, but it went quiet in the 1950s. It just got reactivated last year, and they've agreed to have conversations with us about them taking the lead on the revolving loan fund. That's what community-based work does, right? Acequia Institute has brought resources. We want to give it as a gift to the community to co-manage. And all we will do is, as fiscal custodian of the endowment, is to keep things straight, not let anyone get crooked, so we'll have veto power. But we will not be involved in making decisions about the revolving loans. And then finally, of course, the youth, including this wonderful young man next to me in this picture during Santana about 3 years ago, the grandson of Dana Mestas and Huberto Mestas, the sculptor. And Amayas is such an extraordinary young man. He's also the youngest one in our co-op, and we can't wait for him to come back from college so that he can continue the good work he's doing. But the youth internships is focused on this dirt to gut and spirit idea of teaching the youth not only how to farm the dirt, but to understand how the crops that they produce affects the human gut microbiome and therefore the outcomes for individual and community health. This is very exciting work, and we're also teaching them using indigenous chefs, decolonial cooking and nutrition classes that we offer to the community, and that's been very exciting as well. Here's just a few photos showing you some of the work that the youth are doing, from tending row crops to building adobe ovens. And I should have included, we use these bricks, these adobe bricks, to build a really beautiful adobe oven, but I forgot to include a photo of that work. I was kind of in a hurry today. Here is the other thing we had to do, and this is an idea, I hope someone's listening. I did research for about 3 years trying to find a US made bean thresher, grain thresher. Couldn't find one. No one makes them anymore. The only thing you can get are like these $250,000 large scale machines, like John Deere, like for GMO soy or whatever. It's not good for the smallholder. After doing research, we identified that there were 3 reliable producers on the entire planet. In China, there's a producer, India, and Turkey. We went with Turkey for a lot of different reasons, and we imported 3 of these threshers. And these threshers are pretty amazing. It's increasing the amount of bolita bean production and other crops that can be threshed using these beautiful machines. We do plan, by the way, to offer one for sale. We'll keep one for backup. We imported 3 of them. What's really completely astounding is that the importation and the shipping of these cost 3 times as much as the equipment.
Yeah. Devon, excuse me, this is all very, very interesting, but I'm sure you have already had many people wanting to ask you questions about the presentation, and I like to keep it to about an hour. So
let me wrap it up. Let me wrap it up right away.
Okay.
We take the youth all over the place. These are some of the, pardon me, the SNAP nutrition education cooking classes. The kids are making beautiful food. Look at that tortilla. Don't you want to eat that tortilla? So there's just beautiful cuisine that we produced and shared with the community. And we've been transforming the R&R into the People's Market. This is before renovation, an abandoned room. It was really nasty. And this is where it is now. That's quite a contrast.
Beautiful.
We're doing the right thing. And
Yes,
when we're done with mitigation, it'll be amazing. All kinds of equipment upgrades, the plumbing, the electrical, everything's been redone. And that's why a new smoke and fire alarm system, because they've had 2 fires historically. They've never had a fire alarm system, so we put one in. And here's a new roof that we just finished doing last month. We're very happy with that result. And you used to walk into the R&R, you would see soda pop and candy. Now this is what you see.
Beautiful vision.
There are you,
plan.
and those are our partners.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. And I will say, just to start off I'm going to bring everybody in here.
I'm going to stop my share.
Oh, thank you. Okay. So I think I brought everybody in to the conversation here, or most people on the screen. And one thing I want to say, I was given a gift of the native bolita beans when I came to visit you and Lynette Devon back in November. And they have been so wonderful. And I agree with you about the broth they create. So thank you for that gift. I think about you every week when I make more bolita beans. And your plans and what you're working on through the area of the very southern part of Colorado, the oldest town in Colorado, San Luis, was where I spent several hours with Devon and Lynette. on a tour of the town and got to see, at least from the outside, what is going to be the People's Market and what it's going to be fantastic. I can't wait to go down and see and be part of the grand opening. Now, and Devin, one of the things, of course, that we here at Soil are so committed to and focused on is this idea of bringing the different regions together. You used the word, in fact, you taught me the word bioregionalism. And that's the whole idea about these physical environmental features that bring regions together, whether it's a watershed or different communities sharing different types of food. And that's how the region of Sangre Cristo was originated, is because I thought of it about the food sharing between the San Luis Valley, the northern part where we are in Chaffee County, certainly the southern part of Colorado. Could you speak a little bit about that, how these communities support each other in what they can contribute to the others?
Oh, of course. In fact, that's one of the keys to the success of building solidarity communities around the state and the rest of the world. We have relationships, I think, with other watersheds in New Mexico and in Colorado, and I should say with both farmers and with non-governmental organizations and nonprofits. And I think I would have to highlight within the San Luis Valley the work that we started to do with Jay Sanders and the San Luis Valley Local Foods Coalition, although I must admit we haven't been able to give it as much attention given all the challenges of just getting started and established. But Jay, I promise you, you may regret getting us involved because we plan to help you as much as we can and to connect with all the good people involved in the coalition. We also have a very strong and beautiful relationship with the Mayan farmers at the Rio Grande Park Farm. And of course, Liza Marin and all the folks who have worked to bring that about are our allies and accomplices. So why are we doing that? You know, we had the cooking classes last year and we had a terrible weather. We had terrible weather last year. And so our first lane, our verdolagas, which is a traditional food that we wanted to highlight during the first cooking class, wasn't showing up yet. In fact, it didn't show up until late July, early August, which is like more than a month and a half late. Well, the farmers, the Mayan farmers had some, and they gifted us some of the verdolagas. And there were a lot of other crops that we couldn't grow, including flor de calabaza, the squash blossoms, which was also another traditional food that we wanted to highlight. So that's one of the ways we can help each other, is diversity is the key to resilience. Now, we may have diverse crops in the field, but the diversity is also operating at a larger geographic scale. You can go up the scale. And in our case, if these crops went bad, maybe somebody else's in our watershed, our food shed, if you want to use that term, had better luck. And that often turns out to be the case. So when I think
yes,
diversity at a bioregional scale, I'm thinking about very practical relationships like, exchanging food. And we do the same thing. We'll provide people all over the valley with bolita beans, with chicos del horno, with calabacita. And so the key there, I think, is a very practical relationship in our own bioregion of the Upper Rio Grande. But this also, I think, happens with us. We're very much connected, and we don't want to forget, I urge everyone on Soil, urban farmers. And we work very closely, for example, with Frontline Farms and Fatuma Ahmad and other groups, the East Denver Food Hub, which is actually doing a project very similar to ours in East Denver. Yeah. And so these are the kinds of things that are involved in our work to go to another region and to also connect with urban farmers. And in the case of tribal communities, we get our buffalo from the Texas Tribal Buffalo Project, and we're now developing a relationship with a rancher in New Mexico who's also producing bison. And we think bison is a healthier meat than beef, and we really want to bring that tradition back. People used to eat a lot of bison back in the days, and they're loving it when we serve it during our cooking and nutrition classes. So we're doing all kinds of relationships, but it's really mainly focused on two things: sharing ideas about being resilient and regenerative,
Mhm.
resilient in the social cultural sense and economic sense, and we really want to work with Native American communities, and in fact, about a third of our population is indigenous in San Luis. They're the direct descendants of Genizaros and Genizaras, they're direct descendants of the enslaved. I always like to remind people the biggest clan within the Navajo Nation is the Mexican clan that are
Yes,
the
and Devon, I'd like to open, if you don't mind, for the last 10 minutes here, and thank you for that explanation. And people have to, of course, it's part of what we are all about, is this connectedness and the history and the heritage that we've had here. And how we want to continue that and help bring it back through agriculture and the native lands and what they were used for. In the meantime, I'm sure there are people here with questions for Devon. And this is a good time that we can open it up. You can raise your hand or put it in the chat or just start to talk. And we're all here together. And please unmute yourself and feel free to ask Devon any questions about his presentation, about the Acequia Institute, and or this idea of these communities, all of us helping and supporting each other. So who has a question for Devon? And Jay, by the way, you mentioned Jay Sanders. She's with us here tonight, Devon. And Jay, I plan to announce, but I'll do it right now. Jay Sanders is with the SLV Valley Roots Food Hub, all of that at the Rio Grande Farm Park, all that's going on down there with the SLV Food Coalition. And she is the person who is in charge of the SLV Seed Exchange this year that will happen at Joyful Journey, the last weekend of March. And Soil Sangre Cristo will be there with the table, many other people. It's a marvelous event. So please put that on your calendar. Come down either Saturday or Sunday or both. Stay overnight, soak a lot, and enjoy all that's going on with that wonderful festival, this SLV Seed Exchange at Joyful Journey the last weekend of March. Who has a question for Devon?
It's a free event, and I highly recommend it. I've been to a couple of those, and
Yes, a lot of fun.
A lot of fun and a great learning environment.
Mm-hmm.
Devon, you mentioned that flood irrigation can be really regenerative for the land, but that it can also cause erosion. And I'm wondering, where does that line lie?
I see flood irrigation as kind of like an artisan practice. And it's, as my mentor, Corpus Gallegos, used to tell me, Peña, the one thing you can count on water just keeps coming. And the virtue of flood irrigation is there's something called a head gate, and the compuertas easily manage to slow down the rate of the water so that you're not causing soil erosion. What direction are the furrows if you're doing furrows? And you don't want to ever do them downhill, you want to do them diagonally. For example, these are all very common practices. But the thing about flood irrigation is it does deposit a lot of mineral-rich sediment on our fields. And in the 1990s, we did a survey, a soil auger survey of the long lots in San Luis with a research scientist who used to advise the US Senate, Dr. Robert Curry, who was one of the founders of watershed science. He spent several years working with us, and we used soil augers, but they were only 6 feet long, and that wasn't deep enough to get at the bottom of the topsoil in some of these farms. And so he said, what you have here is a soil bank. He was very impressed because, you know, the average farm in Colorado, they're lucky they have a foot. So, and that's why a lot of them will use, you know, a fertilizer because the soil is so impoverished. I think flood irrigation doesn't get enough credit. It's seen as wasteful and inefficient by the SEO and a lot of others, but that's because they don't understand the ecosystem services that are attendant to that particular method. I will say, as I did mention earlier, Meg, is in times of drought, we will switch to drip irrigation or gated pipe. We may share water scarcity, in other words, as one of the principles of our Acequia customary law. And that shared scarcity is very important. And one of the ways you do that is by adapting and using, say, drip irrigation or gated pipe. So, but you want to do that only when it's droughty, because you don't want to give up the regenerative effects of flood irrigation.
Mhm. Well, and speaking of water irrigation, there's so much news coming out of the San Luis Valley area. And the aquifer, it's slowly going down, even though people have been trying to conserve. What do you see as the future as to how all of these things can survive with less water, or where will the water come from?
Well, I think people need to switch to drought resistant crops or dryland methods. There's 5,000 center pivots in the valley. They've done a lot of damage to the environment, to wetlands, to aquifer recharge. And that's one of the virtues of flood irrigation is we recharge the aquifer. You know, it doesn't go away. It's not groundwater, it's surface water rights, the oldest surface water rights in the state. And it all through infiltration and sub-irrigated flows creates wetlands. In fact, our research shows, according to the county assessor, that there's about 22,000 acres of acequia irrigated acreage in Costilla County that produces 10,000 acres of wetlands. And
Wow.
while center pivots are destroying wetlands because of the cone of depression, we're creating 10,000 acres of wetlands through our flood irrigated practice.
Mm-hmm. Well, and also, I remember distinctly and was quite impressed with what you had to say at the food summit back in December in Denver that many of us were attending, and you were talking so much about using the land to grow food, so much more so than just acres and acres of alfalfa, and that probably has to make a difference in the use of water too, I would imagine.
Well, that's one of the experiments we're going to be running this year is growing lentils, because lentils are not, they're not very thirsty. And people eat a lot of lentils, but they haven't been grown in our area for decades. Ali has his hand up.
Thank you. Ali, do
Sí,
you want to
hola, ¿qué
unmute
tal? Tengo
yourself
una
there? Go
pregunta
ahead.
¿Tiene
sobre
pregunta? Okay, he's going to
las...
translate English. Go
¿Sí
ahead.
me escuchan?
Sí.
Can
Ah, ok.
everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yes, I had a question about thinking about the movement and what other groups and projects in the United States have the same vision that you have and what you in the work that you do, and two, what other projects in Latin America, what other projects there is in Latin America with the same focus, so we can start creating movement and ideas. Thank you.
Esta pregunta y pues el Instituto de la Acequia, the Acequia Institute,
This is a really good question. So the Institute of Acequia, no, we don't only work with the level, regional level, but we also work with state level, international level. And the project, the more important project that what to respond about your question is we are collaborative with Alianza Milpa, and the Alianza Milpa works with all the way from Ecuador, from Central America, Mexico, the United States, and Canada. And this is a group that originated, the origin of this group was that it came from another project, which is called Voces de Maíz, where there was 216 of us, and it was at Balam, and it was in Mexico, and it was before of the biodiversity, so we can formulate the declaration of this law, Ebola, so we can protect the. And this, with this reunion, with this meeting, we created a Mayan cooperative, and it was very important because it presented nationally for Mayan population, and it was about biodiversity. And this project also let us have relationships with all the people. I know a lot of people that is working already with this method, transform method across all the borders, so we can um so we c- so we can work on the protection of the lands and how to return to these lands, how we can return these lands to the people that have been taken away for colonizers, and also to fertilize and regenerate, the what people know about agriology. And we also have worked with groups like the
Okay,
project.
Devin, thank you. Thank you so much. I'm sure that that answer is so extensive. What you can
maybe-
do. Max, you have a question also. I'd like to kind of get through because people will need to leave here pretty soon. It's getting late for a lot.
I'm gonna share my email.
Oh, good. Thank you. And Max, would you like to go ahead and ask your question?
So yeah, happy to. I just want to thank you, Dr. Peña, and invite you to the next round as the San Luis Valley Local Foods Coalition comes back to Costilla County sometime in the next 6 months for action planning process. We're really glad that you were able to join for the assessment last year, and Jay's going to be leading the project still. And we just, there's so much heart in Costilla County and in San Luis, and really appreciate all the work you're doing and the way that you steward the community there. It's really beautiful to see.
Thank
we
you, Max.
haven't been,
Yes.
we weren't as involved as we should have been with the assessment, frankly. We could have done a lot more, and I'm hoping that once we reopen the market, I'll be able to work closer with Jay to contribute a little bit more to that assessment.
Well,
Jay,
the great thing is it's a long, slow process for us.
it
So
takes
there's plenty of chances to get involved. So
It doesn't take years, but decades to do what we're all doing together.
Yeah.
Jay has her hand up next.
Yeah, hi. I just also want to plug that there's a Sangre de Cristo Acequia Association Congresso coming up in San Luis on March 9th. It's a Saturday. And Lynette, Al Stone from the Food Hub, and myself will be on a food sovereignty panel that morning.
Great.
So yeah,
I'll
just wanted
still be
to.
stuck in
Another way for all
Seattle.
of us to, another way for all of us to keep interconnected and knowing what we're doing, because we're all aiming for the same goals. So I think with that, I do have to end it because we do promise people that we keep it for about an hour. Devin, thank you very, very much. The presentation, there's so much to think about and discuss for a very long time. So this will be a good chance for all of us here who attended to start realizing what's at stake in our entire South Central region of Colorado. Also let you know, everyone, that this has been recorded, and there were a number of people that did RSVP who aren't here tonight, and it will be on YouTube by the end of the month. I'm going to be gone for a little while at a workshop, and once I get back, we'll get this posted on YouTube. So it's available, and there's a link on the website, so it'll be available to everyone. And then also, I'd just like to say that on Monday, here in Salida, Moonlight Pizza for the entire day will be contributing 10% of their gross sales to the Soil San Cristo Loan Fund. So if any of you are in the area and you feel like a really good pizza, bring your Valentine, and please, you could either take out or eat in the restaurant, and Soil San Cristo will be a huge benefit for that. We just